Part 1 of the 990 is, as it is headed, the summary. And it presents information carried over from other parts of the form. The first thing it carries over is the description of the organization's mission, or the reason why it's tax exempt. And we think this is one of the most important parts of the return, because everything a tax exempt organization does should flow from its mission. And if you're looking at different organizations, you need to be looking at organizations that have similar missions, because mission affects operating costs, it affects what activities you engage in. So it's hard for us at GuideStar to overemphasize how important mission is. Now, often people will ask us, where can I find more information about line 3, let's say, in Part 1? And on almost every line, not quite every, but almost every line in this section of the return, there is a parenthesis at the end that tells you what part of the form and what line you can find more information, or where it was carried over from. So in this case, if you wanted to know more about number of voting members of the governing body, you would go to Part 6, line 1A. There's an important thing to remember, though. What you see on the 990 is what you get. If you don't find the information you seek either in Part 6, line 1A, or on one of the schedules, if you're looking at a section that has a schedule attached to it, it's not going to be there. The organizations fill out the form and they report what the IRS needs, and the IRS requests the information that it needs to ensure that it can monitor the activities of tax-exempt organizations to determine whether they're in compliance with the U.S. tax code. Another line that people often find very interesting is the unrelated business revenue. Unrelated business revenue is income generated by activities that do not directly carry out the mission. The revenue may support activities that carry out the mission, but the activities themselves don't carry out the mission. For example, GuideStar's mission is to help people make better decisions by making nonprofit information widely available. We sell nonprofit data, and that's considered program service revenue, which is covered here in line 9. And that's because the sales of data is directly related to distributing nonprofit information. It just happens that we're charging for data in certain cases, and in other cases we make it available for free. We also have a newsletter, and our newsletter has paid advertising in it. Selling advertising does not carry out our mission, so that's unrelated business revenue, and we have to declare it here on line 7A and in Part 8, column C, line 12. And we also have to fill out Form 990T, which tells how much tax we owe on this unrelated business revenue. As of the middle of August 2006, Form 990T is a public document, but the IRS doesn't scan it, so we don't have copies. You can, however, get copies from the organization or from the IRS. Then there's a revenue section, and people are frequently interested in the contributions and grant section for the charities. And often they'll say, well, I want to know which donors made the contributions and how much. Donor information is confidential by law with 2 exceptions. The first exception is 501c3 private foundations, and we do have their 990 PFs on our site, and you should find Schedule B, which lists the donors. And the second exception is Section 27 political organizations. Those we do not have on the site. Then you have other types of income or revenue, and then expenses. And then you get to, there's the end of the expenses section, the net assets or fund balances, which can give you an idea of whether the organization is spending more than it's taking in or has the resources to support itself. Then you have Part 2, which is the signature block. And it's going to have the signature and name and date that it was signed, but the signature and name and title of the officer who approved the 990, and if a paid preparer prepared the 990, they'll have that information. And we think it's important to point out that 990s are submitted under penalty of perjury. So when the officer signs, paid preparer signs, particularly the officer, they are saying that to the best of their knowledge, this is a complete and accurate return. And now in the next section of this tutorial, we'll start with part 3, which talks about the organization's mission.